Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Esther with Jenna Bajuszik.
Hi, welcome back to Book of Esther, Chapter 1. We are digging in today and looking at how there is such a difference and contrast between the life and priorities of King Xerxes, whose story is told in this book, and God as king. We talked a little about how the king had used his belongings, his power, his wealth to really show up in a way that he thought was influential and that made him significant. And how God is not that. He is the very opposite of that. He is significant because of who he is and not because of what he owns. Now today we are going to look at how King Xerxes saw women. Now, I completely understand that this was in a different cultural context. I completely understand that this was in 400 BCE. However, the way that King Xerxes views women is very integral to this story because we're about to see him interact with his wife, Queen Vashti, and then also Esther, who's going to come into this story in the next chapter. Now, what was going on was that the king had this huge party, but he had a party for all the guys. And Queen Vashti was having a similar banquet for all of the women in the royal palace. Now, this party had been going on for 7 days already. 7 days of everyone gets everything that they want. 7 days of unlimited food. 7 days of unlimited wine. So on this 7th day, kind of the capstone of the party, when he's bringing out all the stops, King Xerxes was, according to verse 10, high in spirits from wine. And he commanded the eunuchs who served him to bring him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Now, at this point, the attendants go and deliver the king's command, and Queen Vashti refuses to go. Maybe she was also feeling in high spirits from wine and thought this might end differently. It would not be outside of the realm of possibility to assume that this could have ended with her losing her life, based on just history. Now, at this point, the king does not do that. He was extremely furious. He burned with anger, and it was not a great ending to the party. But let's look at what King Xerxes was doing here. He was bringing out Queen Vashti as a decoration, as a trophy. You see, he had already decorated his palace with linen and gold and silver and costly stones and mother of pearl and it was just fancy stuff after fancy stuff after fancy stuff. And he was using his belongings to again portray how wealthy and powerful he was. And he was bringing out Queen Vashti to do exactly that, to prove that he was such an amazing king that he could get a wife as beautiful as Queen Vashti. She was just as important to him as the marble, just as important to him as the cords of white linen and purple material. She was just as much of a show as the mother of pearl and other costly stones that he had put into the floor. She was a trophy. That is why he wanted her there. He wanted to show her off. Now, let's look and compare this to how God sees women. Women are given such a position of power and influence in the kingdom of God in ways that they were not even in that historical context. If you look at the resurrection account, women were the first ones to receive the news from the angels that Jesus was no longer dead, but he had risen from the grave, and they were the ones to go and tell the disciples. It was the women's voices that were heard and respected in a time whenever women's voices were not heard or respected really anywhere else. You can look all throughout history and in the Bible and see women's names included in times in history when they would have normally been looked over. There are women's names in the genealogy of Jesus. There are women who tell the story of God. There are women who are in absolutely incredibly important positions within the kingdom of God, valued not as a trophy, not just for their looks, but for their obedience to God, for their love for Him, for their using of the gifts that God has given them. This was not something that you saw in other ancient religions, but it is really, really unique to the story of how God is a good king.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.